you a self-storage owner or operator looking for service providers to help at your facility? Well, the Storage Business Owners Alliance, also known as the SBOA, has you covered. The SBOA is the premier online hub for connecting self-storage owners and operators to industry-leading products and service providers. We provide one-stop shopping for your business with exclusive offers to save time and money. At the SBOA, we believe by coming together, we help owners and operators grow revenue, gain purchasing power, reduce expenses, improve efficiencies, and increase profitability. We also offer many resources such as our conferences and self-storage unlock webinars to help self-storage owners and operators gain the knowledge needed to become more competitive in the industry. To become an SBOA member or to find out more information, please visit www.thesboa.com today. We can't wait for you to join the Alliance.
Good morning, self-storage industry, and thank you for joining us today for another episode of Self-Storage Unlocked. Our topic today is self-storage insurance, liens, and the law, what you need to know. My name is Iris Segan. I am the president of the Storage Business Owners Alliance, better known as the SBOA. Before we get started, I do have a few quick housekeeping items just to share with you. If you have questions for our speakers today, please ask those in the chat area. I see some of you are already active there. We do our best to answer every question while we're here live. And in the event that for some reason we can't get to all of the questions, we do make sure we pass them all on to our panel so they can get back to you via email after the webinar is over. And also in the chat area and throughout the webinar, we will ask a few poll questions. So please take a quick moment to answer those poll questions. You'll see them go across the bottom, just like the ticker that's down there right now. And they'll also go into the chat. And answering those helps us better serve you. It helps us know our audience better and what kind of information you're looking for. So in today's session, we're going to cover some essential legal aspects of self-storage operations. Learn about the complexities of self-storage insurance, lien laws, and best practices for protecting your business and your customers. Whether you're a facility owner or a manager, this session is going to provide valuable insights to help you navigate these critical topics with some confidence. So I am going to bring up our first guest, and that is Nate Trone. Hi, Nate. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Iris?
Good. Congratulations on your new promotion.
Thank you.
We saw that go out this week. And why don't you tell everybody about SBOA TI, what you do there, and how you can help them?
Certainly. And let me start off by saying thank you for your team for putting on this webinar. I know there's a lot going into the prep work of it. But my name is Nathaniel Trone, and I'm the Senior Manager of Business Development at Cornerstone Insurance Producers, with a focus on the SBOA TI program. Before I stepped into that role, I spent 8 years in the client management department, where I've really gained insight into both the operator and the tenant side of the benefits of tenant insurance. So with that said, I'm excited to dive into the topic today and to hear from the other panelists.
Great. Thank you, Nate. We'll bring you back up in a minute. Next up, I have Carlos Caslow. He is a partner at the Self-Storage Legal Network. How are you today, Carlos?
I'm doing well, Iris. How are you?
Great. So nice to see you here. Could you please tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do over at the Self-Storage Legal Network?
Okay. I'm a partner in the Self-Storage Legal Network with Scott Zucker, And the legal network is administered by the Self-Storage Association. So they handle the marketing and the administration and membership. And the network is a membership organization. And for an annual fee, the members can basically ask Scott or myself, and sometimes both, the operational questions that they have with legal content. And we've been doing this since I think we got on the road back in 1996.
Wow.
And so we've been doing it a long time. And if you've ever been to the Self-Storage Association trade shows, Scott and I usually close out with the Self-Storage Legal Network Power Hour. And the Power Hour is pretty much like what we do, either through email or on the telephone when a self-storage operator has an immediate question. And, unlike a lot of lawyers who say, I have to think about it, we never think about anything. No, we give you a course of action that you can handle, and primarily it's a function of the experience that we have in the industry, because we've both been doing this a long time. And even though the technology has changed and a number of things are different, the questions still seem to be the same about problems with customers, liens, and other issues.
Well, what you do, both of you, I saw Scott at the Michigan show last week, is great work, and we really appreciate everything you do for the industry. I'm going to take you off screen, and we'll see you back in a couple of minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And next up, I have Luke Shardlow from AI Lien. How are you today, Luke?
I'm doing well, thanks, Iris.
Good.
Carlos is a hard act to follow.
I know, right? That's why they always bring Carlos and Scott on last at the shows, right?
Right, exactly.
Well, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you and what you all do over at AI Lien?
Sure. Thanks, Iris. So I'm a recently sort of a new addition to the storage industry, and joined AI Lien back in April, and that was sort of my introduction to the industry. But have a substantial background in software and automation. And, it's been a fantastic introduction. Folks have been very welcoming, and I've really enjoyed getting to know organizations and the people in them. AI Lien is obviously a lien and compliance automation solution, but we pride ourselves on being an automation platform to help our customers with efficiency in collections, all the way through to adhering to the law and being compliant state by state with the lien lifecycle. And we believe that our solution can deliver labor savings and allow our customers to focus on NOI adding activities.
That's great. I can't wait to get into it and learn more about what you guys do over there, because I think you do not only saving people time and their ROI on their activities, but also making sure they're in compliance with the law, which is extremely important, of course.
Correct. Yeah.
So, I will see you back in just a moment. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Rachel Lewis, the Director of Revenue Management for Absolute Storage Management. How are you, Rachel?
Good. Good morning, everybody.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Can you tell us a little bit about you and what Absolute Storage Management does?
Yes, so I've been in storage with Absolute for about 8 years now. And Absolute Storage Management is a third-party operator. So we are the more customizable option to REIT management. And we have been using SBOATI as our tenant insurance program for as long as I can remember, with Nate actually being our account manager for quite a while. I worked with Nate for quite a while.
That's awesome. Yeah. And, I say it all the time. There's a reason SBOATI has been voted #1 through ISS for, I think it's 12 or 13 years running now. So we're happy to have you here as sort of a testimonial and help other people navigate the same issues that your tenants or your operators that you work with are dealing with. So, all right. So we have everyone back. I wanted to start with Carlos and ask you to walk us through some of the key legal considerations that self-storage operators should be aware of when they're drafting a rental agreement.
Oh, something that's near and dear to my heart. We do a lot of rental agreements. The rental agreement, I think, is probably the most important document in the business, because it is essentially the ground rules of the relationship between the storage operator and the tenant or customer. And the starting point is the nature of the relationship. And that is landlord-tenant. Though the word storage figures prominently in most of the facilities' names, we're not in the storage business per se, not like a warehouse or other types of baileys. Instead, self-storage operators rent empty space, which is a pretty good deal if you can figure it out. And the industry does not have a relationship with the tenant's property, and making sure that nature of the relationship, the landlord-tenant relationship, is clear is one of the functions that the self-storage rental agreement performs. Now, this is also stated actually in quite a number, most of the lien laws also reaffirm this concept, but you really want that in the rental agreement. The next item, and these are sort of on the mundane level, is that the relationship is a month-to-month tenancy. Self-storage operators aren't generally entering into 3 or 5 year leases with options to renew. They're kind of going steady with their customers. They're not getting married to their tenants for long periods of time. So just realize that it's a month-to-month tenancy, and that makes termination very easy. The termination period of a tenant is not greater than 30 days if you're on a month-to-month tenancy. So again, you want the rental agreement to reflect that. You get into some other issues that are become important because self-storage operators have a significant amount of other people's property on their premises. And one of the things you want to be able to control is sort of the aggregate value of that type of how much property you actually have it. And if you do a little math, if you've got a 500 space facility, and it doesn't take a whole lot of value to add up into the millions of dollars. So we have a value limitation. We use a default of $5,000, and this is primarily just to give you some control over the basic. It's a number that can be raised if a tenant has a strong use for it, but one of the effects of this particular provision has been when you get a lawsuit for $80,000, which I just saw recently, and you have a rental agreement that says that the maximum value of property stored is $5,000. In today's legal environment, that provision will be usually enforced. Every now and then you run into an outlier judge or an arbitrator, but I would say you can pretty much count on it. And one of the reasons for that is over the years, in its legislative efforts, the SSA has actually put that principle into law. That if you have a dollar limitation of the value that the tenant may store, you want that will be deemed the property. We just had a case out of Indiana where an operator probably went down the wrong road because they set that number at $100. And the court wasn't too pleased with that. And that was a situation where they would not enforce it. So I think, but these are the things that you're a landlord, short-term rentals, and in my mind, you have fairly large aggregates of other people's property at your facility, and you really do have to address these issues directly. And there's the other things like rent and things like that. But these are the things I think are somewhat unique to self-storage.
Great. And Luke, So is there anything you like to see in a lease agreement that applies, as far as liens go? Hopefully we don't get to that point, of course.
I again, you have me following Carlos. I think what we think is unique about our service is that we are customizable. And what does that mean? Well, we don't necessarily provide lease language, right? I would reinforce Carlos's points around the limitation of value, because that so often comes up in cases when there is a challenge. But typically, what we like to do is to enable our customers' take on leases, and we try and leave the legal stuff to folks like Carlos.
Can I say one thing for that is directly applicable to Luke? And that is that most states have a specific rental agreement requirements for the storage operator to have a valid lien. And most typically, it's some kind of notice in the rental agreement that the storage operator has a lien on the tenant property, and the property may be sold if rent is not paid. And then you have states like California and Michigan that add in that you have to have the contact information for another person to whom lien notices can be sent. But it's really important for you to have a valid lien, that you be aware of the statutory requirements, and they're a little bit different for every state.
Thanks, Carlos. It brings up a really good point, which is that what we do is we facilitate that customization across jurisdictions. So Carlos is talking about the variety of notices and requirements by state. You need to be able to implement that consistently for a jurisdiction every single time.
Great. And Nate, also, is there anything on the insurance end you like to see in a lease, since we're kind of starting at the very beginning of the process here?
Yeah, certainly. So just from an insurance standpoint, we highly recommend just adding lease language that speaks to them having some kind of insurance as a condition of rent. That just saves some heartache in the future. And it's also a great customer service, because in the aspect, if something were to happen, they're going to be grateful for that. And if they don't have that in their lease and they don't take any kind of insurance, later down the road, your tenants will at some point probably regret that.
Yeah.
And another comment, everything comes back to the rental agreement. And Nate's comment is very well taken. I always have a reinsurance requirement in the rental agreement. And if you have a value limitation, and you have an insurance requirement, and you have a release of liability for property damage, you've got a lot of defenses to lawsuits for loss or damage to stored property. And the one thing I like about having all three of these in the rental agreement is I've found over the years that judges are like trout, and you never know exactly what bait they're going to bite on. And you'll get a judge that says, well, I'm not going to enforce this release of liability. And then you point out the limitation. Oh, well, that's fine. And so there's a principle that if you've agreed to insure property and you don't get the required insurance, that's also a defense to any claim that would have been covered by that insurance. So the three of these can work together very effectively.
Yeah, definitely. And Rachel, do you have any experience being in third-party management as far as insurance and any legal issues you've seen come up that maybe weren't covered in a lease that maybe should have been, as Carlos has talked about?
We rely heavily on Carlos' team and Scott to have that lease. So our leases are written to have the cap of what they can store in their unit and the requirement for insurance. And like Nate was saying before, we also talk that it is a benefit to our tenants to have this in case something happens. You know, it all goes back to, okay, it's in the lease. We talk through the lease. This is why it's in there. We want your stuff to be protected as you store here because we don't want you to be upset in the end. We want everything to be covered. We want you to know what is going in your unit and what is allowed to be in your unit.
Great. All right. Well, and so back to Luke. I won't make you follow Carlos a third time. No, obviously things happen in life and tenants do go into default occasionally with their payments. So what are the best practices, as far as dealing with problematic tenants or, their abandoned storage units? What does that lien process look like for an owner and operator?
Yeah, so what we like to enable for our customers is consistency. So, a lot of the mistakes that we see happen later in the process because customers, before they come onto our platform, have SOPs and do a varying degree of enforcement of that across their sites, but inevitably you get some kind of variance creeping in, and just things like letters are sent incorrectly dated or not on time. Maybe they missed some data in a lease and it doesn't match the PMS data. There's a variety of sort of tactical mistakes that creep in when you haven't automated that process. And so, we really believe that consistency is super important. It's just as important as being efficient and saving time. But consistency and accuracy is minimize your exposure.
Certainly. And Carlos, do you have anything to add about problem tenants?
No, I think Luke brings up a really good point, and that is that you need a consistent process. And you also, and if you think of the lien, it's it's date specific. You do certain steps, one step at a time, and it's a chain of events because you usually start with an initial notice. Some states require a second notice. Some states require advertising, and there are time marks for all of that. And so if you have a system built in that that already takes advantage of these time marks, I always like add an extra day here, add an extra day there, just so you don't do things too soon. It really can be, I think it makes the lien process work better, and you do want a consistent process with respect to your customers. Everybody's an individual and you'll run into weird situations, but those have to be handled by exception. Most of the tenants that become delinquent, if as you're getting into the second or third month and you haven't heard from them, there's something greater going on perhaps, and that may never be resolved because you lose contact with the customer. But if you have contact, there's always a chance that the payment problem can be resolved, and that's ultimately the goal. And again, a number of customers pay it, but you got to hit your marks, because what the lien law does, it gives you the legal right to sell the goods.
Iris, one thing on the problem tenants as well, just to add on to what Carlos is saying, is I'm not sure how many of your viewers have run into this problem where you have the same tenant coming in every month. They're delinquent. They're trying to negotiate partial payments. They're the kinds of drivers of this inconsistency, right? Because maybe the site manager feels like they need to cut them a break, and they're sort of deviating from SOP. And, we find that by automating the process and taking that decision away from the site manager, it provides them a little bit of shielding, right? They can say to the tenant, I'm sorry, it's out of my hands. There's nothing I can do, right? So that also helps when you're dealing with those problem tenants to deliver that consistency.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of segueing from problem tenants to tenant problems, I'll go to Nate and ask you to walk us through what happens if a tenant has to make a claim for a damage or theft of their stored items.
Certainly. So step one, they would just notify the facility manager saying, hey, I have this loss. And they would direct them to the number on the brochure of SBOATI and say, you can reach out directly to them. And then they give us a call. There's several different ways that they can make a claim through either online, reaching out directly to our claims inbox, and of course, as I mentioned, by calling us directly, which is the main method. And they take what is known as a first notice of loss. So basically, what they gather in that information is what happened, where did it happen, and just basic information about the claims process, about the loss that occurred. And then they take it from there. An adjuster is signed. I just know firsthand that our adjusters are wonderful, and they work wonderfully to work through the claim as quickly and as fairly as they possibly can, and they treat each claim on a case-by-case basis. And just another thing to add is they do reach out to the facility managers, just sort of like backing up the information that the tenant is providing. And that's just helpful just to, get more than one side of the story. In the event of a burglary, there would be a police report made and things like that. And again, that just goes into the file to further back up the claim.
So if a tenant has a claim or a loss, there's not a whole lot that the operator themselves has to do. They're there to answer a couple questions for you, but everything really gets handed off to SBOATI. So it really kind of makes it much easier on the manager operator side, right?
Right. Yeah. Once we get a first notice of loss and the claim is started, there's a relationship between the adjuster and the tenant that occurs, where we're reaching, we're working with them to quickly gather information and just get the full story.
And so, Carlos, if someone doesn't have tenant insurance and they have a loss or they have damage, then what happens?
Well, if they have elected not to insure their property, as we've already pointed out, is required by the rental agreement in one way or the other. And I mean, renters policies and homeowners policies, they all provide some coverage at self-storage facilities. So if they have a renter's policy or they have a homeowner's policy, they may have insurance and not know it. So that's one vehicle that somebody who perhaps isn't participating in the program at the facility can utilize. But I think for the most part, they've made the decision that perhaps they didn't think the stuff was worth insuring. And I think that's a decision somebody can make, but it's one that when a loss occurs, they may not like the outcome. But legally, their remedies against the owner are going to be limited because they're going to come up if they have a well-drafted rental agreement. The owner is going to have some very formidable contractual defenses.
Right, and so between having a good rental agreement and insurance, the owner can at least, even if they would be protected, they at least save themselves from a lawsuit and going to court in the first place, right?
Well, a lot of, one of the things about a well-drafted rental agreement is that it will discourage, oftentimes, better attorneys just decide they're not going to get involved in a case. They're looking at the contract. They look at perhaps take a quick look at the self-storage lien law, and they decide, well, this isn't going to be a very good case from my standpoint. So what you often end up with is they're going to be forced into small claims court, trying to bring the claim themselves, or they're going to have a lower tier attorney, and legal representation does matter. So it really does make it difficult if they don't insure because of the, again, we relate back to the rental agreement and also the state lien laws. And they're, basically saying limitations of value are enforceable. And just think about the economics of it. If a lawyer thinks, well, I might be able to get $5,000 out of this lawsuit, 30-40% of that isn't really going to make them start jumping up and down and saying, yeah, I got to take this case.
Right. Definitely good advice there. Rachel, how do you think, what do you kind of train at all your operators that you work with to effectively communicate how valuable it is to have tenant insurance to their customers? Especially some who might be hesitant to purchase it or think they might already be covered or it's not important. Do you offer any ways for people to overcome that?
Yes, it's actually easy for us to explain to our managers why it's beneficial for the tenants, and it helps our participation rate. One of the biggest things is that there's $0 deductible. Where if they, per our lease, they're required to have insurance. So if they provide us the proof of your renters or proof of homeowners insurance, there's usually a $500, $1,000, even $2,000 deductible. And if it's that's half the cost of the stuff you're storing anyway. So really having a $0 deductible just makes it so much easier to just say, hey, it's $12 a month for this policy. $0 deductible, even if you have homeowners insurance or renters insurance, it'll pay first. If you give them a call, you file your claim if something happens, if you get residential, and it's not gonna hurt your bank account. So that is it's a really easy selling point, honestly, which is why our participation rate's in the 80%. It's just, our team understands the benefit because we've continued to explain it helps not only them, it helps their tenants. It takes our team off of the insurance claim side of it, and they focus on what they do best, storage. So
fantastic. Luke, I'm going to come back to you and ask you if you can explain a little bit more in depth about what specific technologies and tools are available to help manage the lien process and make it efficient, and also keep it in compliance with state laws.
Yeah, of course. There's definitely several tools out there in the market that can help operators stay compliant and keep on top of what can be a rather complicated process. If you have one location, maybe you can stay on top of it there, but as you start to expand and cross jurisdictions, and Carlos was pointing out earlier that, maybe there's a 2-letter state or it's a 1-letter state, keeping track of that and the timings, making sure that's consistently enforced can be problematic. So customers will usually use a blend of tools. What we believe makes most sense is to look for a solution that allows you to automatically sort of manage every time a tenant goes past you, to automatically manage that entire life cycle all the way through to lien. So there's 26, 27 steps in that process. And you can definitely piece together a little bit of a Frankenstein solution by using different parties, but we believe there's a lot of value in being able to have one automation solution that can cover that all the way from those early collections communications through to sending out the appropriate letters for the appropriate jurisdiction on the right templates at the right time, maintaining that log so that if you ever do end up talking to Carlos about a problem, you can hand him a package that says, here's all the things that we did that were compliant, make his life easier. And so that sort of consistency, the efficiency of the automation, and looking for an end-to-end tool that can really handle all of that in one place.
And do you help people with the auctions process also?
Yeah, we are not an auctions provider. We do work with all of the auctions providers, and we do help customers with that part of the process as well. So our tool facilitates auction setup, etc.
Awesome. And Carlos, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, one resource, and this is very low tech, that storage operators might want to consider, especially the smaller operators, is the Self-Storage Association annotated self-storage lien law series. And what it's designed to do, it's a nice manual that's Scott Zucker and myself wrote them. Joe Doherty and Dan Bryant at the association have taken over revising some of the some of the ones now. What it does is it basically takes the operator through every section of the lien law and just tries to explain how it works. And it provides, a basic timeline and the lien letters and things like that. And if you've read it, then you have an overview of what to do. And what I find is that even though you have an overview of what to do, implementation can be hard, and especially when you're running a self-storage facility on a day-to-day basis, because you're under, especially site personnel can be under, pressures from both ownership and and their customers. They're sort of the folks in the middle that deal with things. So I think it's important to have an understanding of the law. But implementation, I think, really has to be something done where a lot of thought is given to it, because it's not terribly complex, but it's easy to make an error when you're also trying to run a facility on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Nate, I'm going to change the subject a little bit to liability insurance. Can you talk? I know that's not your specialization necessarily, but can you talk a little bit, and we can ask Carlos too, of course. What should they be looking for as far as their personal or professional company business liability insurance policies to make sure they're adequately covered?
Yeah, certainly. There's just a couple coverages that they should make sure is in such a policy. Is just make sure it's just broad general liability. Also, just make sure you have risks that are specific to your industry that are covered in that policy. I know some self-storage might have some different risks than other industries. And also just make sure you have the adequate limits to cover that.
And Rachel, do you have anything you want to add there?
Cool.
It's kind of a big encompassing subject.
Yes, being third-party management, we make sure that our company is also listed as additionally insured on those policies. That's kind of a big one for us.
Right. Carlos, what do you recommend?
Well, obviously the two unique coverages in self-storage are customers' goods legal and the sale and disposal legal liability or wrongful sale liability. And those are, from an operating standpoint, the sort of two must-have coverages operators have. You're obviously going to want to have, premises liability, because there will be slip and falls. There will be doors that come down on people and claims for these kind of things. So you also have to make sure you have a sort of your general business liability policies as well. But the specialty coverages, I mean, if you're not dealing with one of the specialty carriers in the business, like Minico and Deans and Homer have been doing this for, 60 years, and you're just, buying a generic policy, you may not be covered for these things. So you do have to be a little bit careful and making sure you have those coverages, because those are the kinds of things that are unique to self-storage. and we have a lot of good insurance vendors in this business.
Yeah, we sure do. And Luke, before you work with anyone in the lien process, do you make sure they have certain liability coverage?
We do, yeah. We request that our customers, adhere to best practices as the rest of the panel has reviewed in some detail, and we always recommend that these lease terms are written in and that these best practices are followed.
Great. We have a question from the audience. Jennifer said that they recently had a burglary. The tenant called the police. They got a police report, but neither she nor the tenant has heard back from the police. Should they follow up?
Iris, I can start with
anybody who wants to jump in.
Well, if they have insurance, they're going to want to talk to Nate.
Right.
Yeah, but just I don't work in the claims department, but I do interact with them pretty regularly, and I do hear stories. But yes, the short answer is yes. I would follow up with the police department, making sure everything's good. Typically, they'll give you a case number right when you report it. So that's something that you would want to make sure you write down, because I know our adjusters are going to ask for that case number. So just make sure you have that at your disposal. But also, I know maybe not for every burglary, but for most, our adjusters do call sometimes the police department just to get their story on it. And again, that's where that case number comes in handy.
It's my understanding that if you have a burglary claim, a police report is pretty much required.
That's what I thought too. And Betty said, she chimed in too. She said it's on the customer to follow up. In her area, the police usually won't follow up unless there is new information or if they need something. So I definitely would have that customer follow up and get that, like Nate said, that report number, because they're going to need it. And we have another question. This one's for Carlos from Christine. Besides the annotated law booklets, how do you recommend that these owners, operators, managers get familiar with the law?
Well, the starting point obviously is reading the law itself, and the lien book I mentioned. What it primarily tries to does is explain some of the more opaque language that our legislators tend to put into statute. But I think if the way I have always looked at lien sale process is I sort of think it's best to plan backwards. Because you've got a timeline that you've got to meet, and if you sort of think, we're conducting a sale, especially if you're doing live sales and you do 4 or 5 a year, you've got some specific dates where you've got to have everything in order by that time. And if you plan backwards, the typical lien statute is going to require somewhere between about 55 and about 65 days. A few states are longer. New Mexico's 90 days before you can actually conduct the lien sale. So it's a reasonably fast remedy. But if you're actually trying to do this yourself, what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that you're looking at the sale date that may be coming up, and when do I send my first letter? If it's a 2-letter state, second letter. When do I advertise, and how long do I advertise? Some of that's changing a little bit because of online auctions. The nice thing about the online auction is that you no longer have to, accumulate more, several spaces in order to hold a lien sale. Back in-person auctions, you couldn't just auction off one space. You'd have to have 4 or 5 spaces at least to get an audience of bidders. Online auctions, one space is the same as 10. it doesn't really matter, because the people who go to who look at those sites just scroll through one space after another. And if you've got one up, that's fine. So that it's changing a little bit, but again, starting point, it's usually triggered by the initial lien letter. End point, and you've got to figure out what you're doing in between, because there's other marks that you have to meet. So I always think planning your timelines is maybe one of the most important things to do, and I think that's actually one of the kinds of things that AI Lien does for you. I mean, that's what their product kind of manages.
Yeah, I mean, just to key off that, Carlos, I think, that emphasis on that timeline is super important, and if you're managing this yourself, one of the things you can do is build yourself out this sheet. I imagine you're still going to have to do lot cuts and photos and everything to post photos. So, we find customers still like to batch for the most part, unless they have an exception and want to send some, obviously within compliance, but outside their typical process. Keeping those in batches helps you then, because you can plug in all these dates. You can say, all right, I know for this jurisdiction, I've got to back up X many days to get to my ad. I've got to back up X many days to get my lien to sale, so you can sort of map it out. I'm going to need photos at this point. Obviously, automation is going to help you with that and remove the burden, but that's definitely a way you can manage that and stay compliant.
Right. And of course, we always recommend that people join their state and national associations. They often are really good about keeping you informed if there's a change in laws and all of that type of thing. And, as everyone has said, each state can be very different as far as compliance. The guys have already mentioned some states you have to send out 2 letters, some it's 1. Maybe some you can do email. Maybe one, it has to still go in the newspaper. Does anyone still require it goes in the newspaper, Carlos?
Yes, they do. It's a very powerful lobby at the state level.
Yeah, so that's where it's really important to not only be part of your national association, SSA, but the state associations, and attend those meetings that they have. They're very good. There's almost always someone there to talk about the law, like Carlos or Scott Zucker, and it's very informative. You can ask your questions, and they do a really great job. I enjoy listening to them every time.
Alicia raised a really important point, and that is the lien laws do change. And we had a number of changes this year. And I know that the Self-Storage Association plans on a fairly aggressive legislative agenda going into 25-26. So there are probably going to be a number of states where there will be tweaks. And one of the things they've been working on is to modify the publication requirements, because that's one of the more expensive parts of the process if you still have to put an ad in a newspaper. But I think that they're going to be working on a fair number of states. And when those laws change, there may be you may need to make a modification to your rental agreement. You may or you may need to make a modification to your lien sale timeline that we've been talking about.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so when those, do you send out an sort of an addendum if you already have a lease with someone and those laws changed? Do they need to send them a notification?
Yes, but one of the nice things about self-storage is that you can change pretty much the terms and conditions on a 30-day notice. You're not locked into anything. And I think you also have to kind of evaluate the significance of the change. There's some changes that take place that you're going to want to put into effect, day one. There's others that are less significant and may not actually. You can modify your rental agreement, but it can apply to tenants as they rent spaces, and then maybe at some point, 6 months, 9 months into the process, you pick up the remaining tenants, because all rental agreement changes that are done required by these laws might modify. They're not equal. Some are not that important to do something immediately.
Okay. And Rachel, does third-party management help people stay updated with those?
Yes. So we have quite a few of our team members that are on the state boards. So we are well aware, and we are part of every self-storage association in the state that we operate, as well as states that we touch. So we are mostly in the Southeast and Midwest, but we are also part of the the Pennsylvania, Maryland area, the Indiana, things like that, so that we know what is going on with those lien laws, because they are complicated and they do change.
Absolutely. So, Christine, there's all kinds of resources for you. Nate, I am assuming if I am one of your insurance clients that you're going to make sure I know all the up-to-date laws as well.
Yes, that's something that we take a keen focus on at SBOATI. And basically, we like to break it down into bite-sized, manageable chunks to where you're still under the law, but we give you resolutions of processes that you can put in place, so where it doesn't necessarily impede your day-to-day processes. I know our account managers are very well versed in that.
Awesome. And we have another question from the audience. This is from Taylor, asking, how often should you have your rental agreement reviewed by a lawyer to ensure that you have all of the most up-to-date clauses and terms?
I guess I should probably answer that.
Back to Carlos, yes.
So, first of all, if there has been a significant change in the law, and again, if you're participating in your state association and the national association, you're going to find out about what's happening on the legislative side of things. If there's a bill pending that might have an impact on your rental agreement, I think as a matter of practice, unless something there's been a major court case or something really dramatic has happened on the legislative front, you're looking at something probably about every 2, maybe 3 years that you really should make some updates. And to give you an example of why that becomes important is operators, are adopting technology and changing their methods of operation as the technology becomes a more important factor in the industry. And so, just think about one small change, going from pen and ink to online rentals. Now, theoretically, it's the same rental agreement, but not quite, because you want to make sure the rental agreement is clear on the issue of electronic signature, and you also have, as you're moving to a more electronic environment, making sure that the customer is consenting to receive perhaps automated text messages and automated phone calls. Usually this is done as part of the collection process. And these are things that, 10 years ago, nobody gave any thought to. And so it is a good practice to probably just have it reviewed. Shouldn't take a long time, every 3 years or so.
Okay, that's great. We have another question from Josh. He asked, are the lease agreements offered through our state associations adequate to cover the facility in the event of a potential loss or auction sale?
I'm familiar with California and some of the other states. I think Wisconsin, and they do a pretty good job. I mean, I think those are pretty good basic rental agreements. They have all of the kind of everything on the basic checklist. And so the one issue that you've got to be a little bit aware of is updating and things like that, because the board, when you're dealing with state associations, the board that had the first idea, let's do this, have they also been making sure that we do updating as well. And so other than that, but I think the basic rental agreements that I've seen, I've done some of them, And I know Scott's done some of them. I think the rental agreements are pretty good.
Excellent. Well, we are getting, it's almost been an hour already. So I would like to just kind of go through each one of you before we take you off screen, and maybe you can just offer one bit of advice regarding our topic today to especially people who are new to the industry or maybe a small owner on your area of expertise. So Rachel, I will start with you and third-party management and how you help people with the law.
Yes, so we help you by knowing what is going on in your state. We have a whole team in our in absolute storage management that knows the lien law and will take care of those auctions for you. And then just to touch on in tenant insurance, we again have a team that makes sure we take care of those and takes it off of the property managers even when a claim happens. So it really helps you, stay hands off and up to date with everything that's going on. All the changes.
Thank you. And Nate?
Yes, just my one piece of advice would be to, when you're talking with your tenant insurance provider, just make sure you're covered in the compliance aspects. Again, I can't stress enough how important it is to have insurance as a condition of rent in your lease, like we talked about earlier. That protects you, protects the tenant. So that's just another piece of advice. And I just ask your tenant insurance provider for what recommendations they have to stay under the law.
Great. And Luke?
Yeah, I would simply say that, you don't have to do this alone. There's a lot of resources out there and a lot of products. Speak to your state association. Obviously, where we offer an automated solution in the marketplace, there are others that are in the market that offer solutions to parts of the problem. Yeah, I would just say that, you don't have to do this all yourself. There's tools and support systems out there to help you.
Absolutely. Okay. Last but not least, Carlos, what's your best piece of advice for our audience today?
Well, I'm going to refer to the catastrophic events that we've had in the Southeast earlier this year. And I think it's really important for storage operators to look at their corporate insurance program, both their buildings, because there were a number of operators that have had significant damage to their storage facilities, and their liability coverages, because when these just unbelievable events hit Florida and North Carolina, it's really created a lot of problems for storage operators. They have, their property in a lot of cases has been significantly damaged on the one side, and they've got customers whose contents have been destroyed on the other side. And it may be next to impossible for quite a while to even get onto the premises. And having a really good corporate insurance plan that encompasses both your insurance needs and your customer insurance needs, I think is one of the keys to a successful operation. Fortunately, it doesn't happen a lot, but when it does, you want it to be there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's obviously very timely. So I want to thank everyone for coming today. This was really informative, and I want to thank our audience because you really came to the table. And sometimes we don't get a lot of questions. Sometimes people don't answer polls. Our audience today was just exactly what we want every single time we have one of these webinars. So thank everyone. I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving next week. I'm going to take our guests off screen and just talk about a couple of things that are coming up. So I will see you all later.
Bye.
Thank you for being here. Okay, so again, thank you to the audience. I just want to tell you, in 2 weeks, we will be back. We have the next webinar, which will be December 5th, and we'll be talking with the ladies from Universal Storage. And I just love them so much. We get to see Ann Ballard, if you have never heard the Hat Lady speak before, you are missing out. And so in 2 weeks, you have the chance to hear from her, as well as Sarah Beth Johnson and Lou Barnholt from Universal Storage Group. And their topic on that day will be It's Time to Thrive, the Fundamentals of Success. Great way to be closing out the year. So be sure to register. You all know it's free. You know how, because you're here today. And we'll put the link in the chat for you. I will play one more video as we close out today. And if you think of any other questions that you want our panelists to answer, you can still put them in the chat and we will make sure they get those questions afterwards to send you an email and update you on those answers. So thanks again, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone next week. Be safe. In a world where brand experience is paramount, upholding your company's standards demands unwavering consistency in every location. At the SBOA, we understand the critical role consistency plays in driving your business's success. That is why we joined forces with MSI to introduce a revolutionary internal audit program tailored to meet the specific needs of your organization. Our game-changing audit program leverages cutting-edge technology and expert insight to bring you unparalleled accuracy and reliability. We know that success in this competitive environment is paved with adherence to operational requirements, and every company has its own standards along with state and local regulations to adhere to. So we've made our internal audit system completely customizable, all in a user-friendly app. The app enables on-site agents to collect real-time data and insights from their respective locations. This feature ensures that information is up to date and allows for quick responses to any issues or challenges that could arise. Our internal audit program also has advanced photo and video reporting capabilities. These visual reporting tools allow leadership to visualize non-compliant sites and gain a comprehensive understanding of the issues, with specific examples for clear context, which enhances communication and leads to faster resolutions. And it can be done with just a few clicks and the snap of a photo or quick video. And our program provides an in-depth understanding of each store's performance and challenges. This feature allows for a comprehensive assessment of how well each location adheres to operational requirements and brand standards, helping to identify areas for improvement. Are you ready to take your self-storage business to the next level? Explore our comprehensive suite of services, including internal audit programs, mystery shopping, and unlock your full potential. Contact us today to embark on a journey of excellence and success. 248-254-9000.